Hello and welcome back. So what should you do if you want to prove the prevalence of EDS? I believe that one thing you need to do is make sure you break out the prevalences of things that are known. If you want to include joint hypermobility syndrome, you need to break that out, but you need to break that out. Point out that that percentage of people has joint hypermobility syndrome and recognize the difference in criteria for that. 2, then you need to go through and see who has had genetic testing done and what the genetic testing showed. You need to break out those portions that are proven as other forms of EDS and show what their percentage is, because there are different forms. 3, you then need to be prepared and be aware that you need to do a cross-sampling of not just one area, but of the world. That means you need to be prepared to go to different countries to figure out how to accommodate and adjust for those areas that do not have as good of testing versus areas that have great testing, everything else. And to truly get a cross sample, the gold standard would be to randomly choose a certain number of people in throughout the world. And you go and you actually run the test on them. You run the Brighton scale. You do the HEDS checklist. And then you test genetically for EDS and any of those forms. And it's just a random throughout the world. Maybe you show, and you make sure you get the areas that are less populated, higher populated, but you get a fair sampling. And you'd need, obviously for that, need way more than 6,000 to get a fair sampling because of where you'd need to take them from. You'd need more from bigger cities than from smaller cities. You'd need some from out in the country, everywhere, and spread throughout. Even just in the US, there's such a huge discrepancy of where it may be common and it may not be, that you'd need to take that into consideration and be aware. Maybe people with EDS don't move around as much. So maybe they're all concentrated in certain areas. And so to maybe take just one area of the US, one big city, and one big city in each other country would still not be necessarily a fair sampling. You'd need to check sporadically throughout the world for these. You can't leave out things, lower undeveloped countries like Africa, South America, things like that, just because they may not have the medical care that other places do. So they may not be getting diagnosed. You need to take that into consideration. Hence why you would need to test each one of those people. The other part of that is you would need to test everyone to really be fair, because some doctors will give a diagnosis of one thing, other doctors of another thing. Maybe they aren't testing, maybe they aren't aware, things like that. Be aware. Average from when the bad symptoms hit is 20 years from the start of those symptoms until diagnosis. How many of those are you missing in that number? Maybe someone got lucky and has a family member who has it, so they are able to spur the testing on. That's kind of what happened with my family. We got one diagnosis and it answered the question for a lot of people, and some of them never had the major symptoms. But because they had enough of the other stuff, it was known they had it. So that's what you would really have to do to be able to prove the prevalence of EDS. And you would want to be sure and publish the percentages of each type too, to be fair. Hope that helps, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.